Well, Dan, I guess I'm still allowed to say Happy New Year. It's been a minute since you and I have had a chance to chat and catch up. Real life getting in the way of work life, but that's okay. Here we are. Bears still without a GM or a head coach and searching, casting a wide net as we get deeper into January. He's Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. I'm Dionne Miller from ABC7. Dan, how are we feeling about where this search is at right now?
Individually, I'm tired. I'm very, very tired. I had someone that you know well, I won't name their name on the show, say that call me up last week. We were talking about various things involved with the Bears, the coaching search, the GM search, and he said, "You need a break, man." And I was like, "Is it that obvious?" He said, "Yeah, it really is." So this is my apology to everyone out there. The break is coming. Right now, we're going to power through. We're going to grind through, and we're going to figure out when the Bears are actually going to get to an end with the GM and coaching searches. And right now, Dan, I don't know if we can set a realistic end date because I'm looking at my list of names of guys who have interviewed, my list of names of guys who are still to do preliminary interviews. And I say, man, this is still going to take some time yet for them to go through all the necessary steps to fill these two positions. And so I guess it's just, buckle that seatbelt and stay buckled in until they tell you it's time to get out of the car.
I hope that they continue to take their time. I appreciate, though, that they are casting a wide net. To me, Dan, that indicates they don't know exactly what they're looking for. They said all the right things, but if they knew exactly what they wanted, they could eliminate some of these people. But it feels like every day I wake up, a new name is added to the list. And it's like, okay, well, whoa, what direction are we going in? They can't all have a similar vein in between all of them. They have to, they're all different. They're all very different. They all come from very different walks of life and backgrounds, especially the GM candidates. And it's just, it worries me that they're not as focused on knowing exactly what they want. Are they just rolling through like Bill Polian's Rolodex, and finding all the connections they have to him? Like, how are they determining who they want to continue to talk to? And how are these new candidates popping up every day?
Well, your worry is shared throughout the league. And as we came on, I was going to read off all the candidates for general manager and all the candidates for head coach. And I thought, well, this was going to take about 15 minutes, right? And we can't do that. We can't name all these names. I can tell you that today, it's Tuesday, January 18th, that Morocco Brown and Elliot Wolf were in the Zoom room. I was going to say in the building, but it's just the Zoom room for now, doing their preliminary interviews for the general manager position. And after this, they still have 6 known general manager candidates that they need to talk to, 4 more head coaching candidates that they need to talk to. I think they're up to 15 people that they have talked to. That net is really wide, Dionne. And to your point, that's 25 known people that we're talking about. There has been some skepticism around the league on whether they were truly prepared for this. The reason that's most alarming to some folks around the league is because we walked out of January 2021 saying, boy, not sure they should have kept Ryan and Matt, right? And so they better be prepared if we get to this state a year from now with a very short list in that upper right-hand drawer of guys that they want to reach out to and guys they really want to target and guys they really believe can be successful in this next role. They've done this. This is their MO for this search. It's a wide net. There are some people who question whether that's the smartest plan of attack. And the other part about this, Dionne, is they've already talked to 6 head coaching candidates without having a GM hired. So is that homework ultimately going to be wasted if a new GM comes in and says, hey, listen, I want to run a search for my own head coach and I want to start it fresh and I want to do it with these guys and start the whole process from square one?
We've talked about there are a certain number of head coaches in this league who have the what lack of a better word, panache or whatever, who can come in and say, okay, this is who I want as my GM and kind of run the show from the head coaching position. But the Bears aren't hiring that person at this point anyway. When they're not bringing in Sean Payton or a Bill Belichick type. Like, they're not bringing in that person. So in my brain, it would make more sense to say, okay, we're going to focus on, this is what I'm worried about. There's too many voices in that room for the interview. It's like, we need to focus on finding our GM and then let them guide us into focusing on our head coach instead of all of these different interviews and all of these different people from all different walks of life. I mean, like 5 people in the room is a lot, Dan. And especially Tanisha Wade, like, bless her, but she was in charge of like social media and entertainment. And now she's sitting in on these GM interviews. And it's like, wow, okay, so her questions are going to be far different than those of Bill Polian or even of what George has in mind. So it feels like there's a lot of talking going on right now. And I don't know that it's getting them closer to where they need to be. And that is very concerning to me.
I think, listen, one of the advantages for us with 25 names on the list is that when this search ends, there will be 23 people at least who weren't chosen, who will be able to provide feedback and insight into how the process ran and exactly who was involved doing what, who was asking the questions. Were they good questions? Were they surface level questions? That's always the criticism of George and Ted, that it's always very surface level. There's not a real sophisticated football acumen to push towards answers that will help you identify people that will make your football team more successful. But this process has to come to a conclusion at some point. And the focus of it, that word you mentioned a few minutes ago, is paramount. You need to know exactly what your vision is and what kinds of people you are targeting. And you should be able to plow through some of these preliminary interviews and know immediately, yes, that person makes the short list. No, that person isn't fitting what our vision is. And it shouldn't be the secondary list after this shouldn't be 10 and 5, right? Like we should be narrowing down from 25 to 8, fairly quickly when they get through the 25. And so we'll see where it goes. I will say this, there is sort of this impatience amongst fans, which is totally understandable and totally natural, but there is no shot clock on this search, right? If the Bears wanted to take this search into mid-February, they could, right? And it's not like the clock would run out and the league would say, hey, guess what? You're going to have to proceed to 2022 without a general manager or head coach. Shot clock violation, that's not what we're doing here. And so they can do that. They just have to understand that right now, 3 other teams are in the market for general managers.
Correct. 7
other teams are in the market for head coaching openings. And so there are some dominoes that will fall with those other jobs that will affect the Bears search. It won't necessarily ruin it or derail it, but it will impact it at some point.
Okay, so we didn't really get a chance to dissect those 59 minutes of fun that we had with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips a week or so ago. We didn't really talk about that. During that press conference, George was asked, is, being on board with Justin Fields as your quarterback a prerequisite for this job? And he said, no, they need to have a firm vision of what they want for the quarterback situation. But Dan, in my brain, I thought, yeah, it would have to be, right? Or you're right back in the Mitch Trubisky doesn't mesh with Matt Nagy situation, correct? Or am I wrong? What do you think? What did you think?
No, I mean, I think George was essentially just trying to keep the box open, right? And not say, hey, we need an offensive-minded head coach. We need a defensive-minded head coach. We need a guy who believes in Justin. We need experience. We don't need experience, whatever it is. I think he was essentially communicating that we're going to be open-minded to whatever any of these candidates have to tell us about our operation. It would be silly, obviously, with what they invested a year ago, giving up draft capital to go trade up and draft Justin Fields, to then unite with a coach who doesn't believe in Justin Fields. It would be the sign of an organization that, once again, is just
but that's what
not
they did.
Understanding where the bullseye is, right? And so, you would hope that whatever final hires are made come into that podium at Hallis Hall and say, we believe that this kid can be a star, right? Because that's what the Bears set themselves up for. They set themselves up for the roll of the dice on Justin Fields to see if he can be a star or if he's just another washout. And so you really kind of have to see that through with someone. And so that was probably more words than MO. There were a couple of things from that 59 minutes of fun, as you mentioned it, that are worth referencing. One of them for me was the idea that George McCaskey had selective amnesia as to when Bill Polian became part of their process, right? And he basically told you that Bill had been working with them throughout the season, how far into the season, how short into the season, whenever it was. But he was there initially to help George and Ted come to the conclusion of, should we, in George's words, retain or replace the general manager and the head coach? Obviously, the Bears got to the end of the season. They checked the box next to replace both. And then they said, hey, Bill, since we checked this box, will you please stay along in the shotgun seat to help steer us to the end of this thing and be our navigator of this thing? That's an issue on 2 levels. Number one, it is, we listened to Matt Nagy for months talk about the honest and open relationship he has with his bosses at Hallis Hall and how there's constant feedback. I'm not sure that Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace ever knew that Bill Polian was somewhere in the shadows overseeing everything they did, right? And so you say, hold on a second, should we have known that someone else was doing the evaluation of us while we were talking to you on a regular basis? The other part of this, Dionne, that I can never get past, and people in the league continue to bring this to my attention, is that George and Ted continually, with their actions and with their words, tell you that they need help making significant football decisions. Yes. It's why, of course, he was part of the process in 2015. It's why Bill Polian is part of this process now. And so it's an honest and admirable admission that they need help with these football decisions. And yet there's this stubborn resistance to saying, what if we hired a younger, non-retired, Ernie, of course, your Bill Polian type to just hold this role full time? why is there? I asked George directly, why the resistance? And he just continues to say, this is the structure that worked for us. And you're like, well, number one,
it's not working.
And number
George,
two,
it's not working.
Why not try something? Why not try something? Why? Why not? And I can't
that's the thing, Dan. You nailed it. Like, why did they needed help to know whether or not they should retain Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace? Really? I could call them and tell them. We knew that it was time to make a change. That they don't trust their own decisions because, as George openly admits, he's just a fan and he shouldn't be making football personnel decisions. Okay, then why are you hiring the GM and the head coach? Like, you shouldn't even be in that situation, George. Like, it occurs to me that he should not be in that role if he's just a fan and doesn't have that football acumen. So who's he leaning on for that? Obviously Bill Polian, but he can walk away and isn't going to be there when things don't go the way that they're supposed to go. And they're in this position again in 4 years. It just doesn't feel like there's been enough change. It's like they cleaned house, but they left cobwebs in the corner that they're okay with. And they're just going to go forward knowing that dirt is still there.
It's kind of like when you clean your college house, right? You move out and you say, hey, let's clean today. And then you get like halfway through and you're like, it's good enough. You know, the people that are moving in here are going to be slobs.
That still happens, Dan. That's my kitchen right now.
And so, listen, like the other part of it is you're looking at the changes that they did make. And basically, George said that Ted had to persuade him to shift out of the responsibilities of overseeing the general manager going forward. And so instead of saying, okay, thank you for that, Ted, we are going to hire someone to become our permanent overseer of the general manager position. George, not a football evaluator, on the bottom line of his business card says, I'm going to be the overseer of the general manager. And in the same 59 minutes of fun, he says, by the way, I've never overseen a general manager before, and I'm going to need the new general manager's help in learning how to oversee the general manager. And so those types of things get twisted around, right? I had someone say to me last week that, listen, the Bears still have an opportunity here to make two good hires, right? There's a chance they can make this shot. They can get a good GM and a good head coach, and everyone will go, great, those were good hires. But this person said it's basically like taking a 3/4 court shot during a timeout at a Bulls game with a blindfold on, right? Like sometimes that shot goes in and you say, wow, the shot went in, but you'd probably want to get a better shot, right? Like you'd probably want to get closer. You'd probably want to have the blindfold off, and you'd probably want to have faith that it's like a free throw, right? And you could make the shot and set your organization up long term. And so they got a lot to do here, Dionne. It's a heavy lift. And, you know, there's a lot more to this that occurs beyond the hiring of these two people who will have press conferences and big headlines written about them, and then really some very serious work to get down to immediately.
And the longer that this takes, the more immediate that becomes. And I just feel like they have to get this right, because you think about the last decade and going from Trestman and Emery to John Fox and Pace and Nagy, and just kind of getting, I don't know, it feels like there's some of these candidates, right? You look at them, you look at them and you think, okay, that looks like Ryan Pace, looks like just like the guy that they just let go, you know? And so you want to make sure that they know what they need and what they're looking for. And I don't know with all these candidates that they have enough of that focus that they need at this point. And that's why I know you say there is no timeline, but I do feel like there is some urgency to this, to get some stability going for their franchise, and to kind of make the fan base feel like, all right, we can believe in what they're doing right now. And I don't know that after that press conference and the season that they just had and the decisions that it seems like they're making right now and how they're trying to move forward with this, that there's a lot of faith in them at any level right now.
Right. Well, and the other part of this is the New York Giants, one of the other teams that's in the market for both a GM and a head coach, moved on to the second wave of GM interviews as of today, right? Joe Shane, who was in the Zoom room with the Bears on Sunday after that impressive playoff win that the Bills had on Saturday night, is now on to his second interview with the Giants. Joe Shane is also tied with Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator in Buffalo. And so you say, okay, these are types of things that bring a time sensitivity to your search. Listen, you should have on your list of 25 enough candidates where you say it can't just be one guy and one guy only. So you have to have some flexibility there. But listen, if you really like certain candidates and they have to move because other teams are offering them jobs, then that's on you, right? And you have to be comfortable with missing out on a guy or two just because you want to make sure you cast your net wide enough to bring in as many fish as you can, right? And so that's part of this equation. What I mentioned earlier about the heavy lifting beginning after these hires, this is so significant, and it's not talked enough about in this league, and it probably wasn't talked enough about when Ryan Pace and John Fox united in 2015. These guys have to come in and then solidify staffs below them. And the GM's role, that's solidifying a front office where you have, a director of player personnel, an assistant director of player personnel. If you want to have an assistant general manager, you talk to your bosses and say, I'd really like this guy to be my assistant general manager. You have to have director of college scouting. You have to have a director of pro scouting. In the coaching world, you're going to have to hire a coordinator, another coordinator, a third coordinator, assistant coaches below them. And so these are all things that the people in the Zoom room for the Bears need to understand when we talk about surface level questions. Okay, I want to know candidate X. I want to know candidate Y. Who are the people that you want to bring into our organizations to stabilize those roles throughout the building so that we have elite minds in every single role down the ladder, right? And if we don't, then we're stuck in mediocrity. And so you're hopeful that there's enough of a vision and enough of an understanding from a guy like Bill Polian to say, listen, I really like that candidate. I don't know that he has enough connections or vision for how he wants to assemble the staff. Let's put him off to the side for now and figure out if someone else can check those boxes.
So Elliot Wolf is at the top of your list. Is that what you're saying? Just because he's connected? I'm just kidding. But I would hope that every candidate that they bring in who's interviewing for the GM position has that list in their drawer of like, if I ever get this opportunity, this is who I want. Now the Bears might not have that, as George and Ted might not have had that list ready to go in this moment, but you would hope whoever they hire does. And I would think like that would be my dream. If I was interviewing for such a position, I'd be like along the years, I'd be, pinpointing the people I would want to work with when I was in that position. And hopefully that's what these candidates are coming in with so that they can hit the ground running and move forward. And I do think like getting Justin Fields back into some sort of like, okay, this is the plan for your development. I think that's really big, especially losing 8 in a row to finish his rookie season and not being able to play that last game. I feel like they need to catch him now. I feel like that psyche needs to be, boosted in this moment and feel like, all right, I've got the guys around me now that are going to really help me propel my career the direction everyone expects it to go, but really feel like he's on the same page with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. The quarterback in your building has to be a hub of energy. It just has to be a hub of energy. And so you do need to rejuvenate Justin and hope that he reports to the first day of, off-season weightlifting, whenever that may be, with the, a verve to him, with a feeling like, hey, all right, guys, let's go to work. We've got this, and we can accelerate this turnaround a lot quicker than people on the outside believe. There is no shot clock game, but there is urgency, right? And there is a time sensitivity to these moves you make because other teams around the league are competing for similar personnel, and you've got to figure out a way to bring all that together in a way. To your point, again, you've got to get everyone with, even if it's a little bit artificial initially, there's got to be an energy and a belief that this thing's going in the right direction. And the Bears haven't earned that benefit of the doubt in the outside world. And it's been pretty depressing for me recently to go back through introductory press conferences for Ryan Pace and John Fox and Matt Nagy and read all the things that were said by all those people and then realize, man, none of that amounted to anything. And all of the stuff that was sold to us ended up just being a poof. It didn't turn into what they thought it was going to turn into. And so these next two people, by no fault of their own, are going to have people in the outside world going, yeah, I know you say you're ready for this, but are you really ready?
The skepticism is going to be so high. Remember when Mark Trestman shuffled the locker room, like had all the moved everybody's locker to try to create some sort of camaraderie? That did not go well. I mean, you think about all the things that we've been told at these press conferences and the way that these coaches were going to set up their teams. They didn't get that response. And some of the things that have come out since Nagy's been gone and things that we didn't see behind closed doors, that some of these reports that come out here, it kind of, I don't know, it raised an eye to the authenticity behind the scenes that was really there, or how guys were really feeling. I mean, it's just been interesting to see that fallout from his time here.
Well, look, that's inevitable and it's natural, right? It's like any workplace. I always tell people, like, people in the outside world always assume that there's 53 guys on a football team and they all like each other and they're all, and you're like, listen, like there's people at your job that you don't like. There's bosses that you don't get along with. There's people, everything happens in different workplaces where it's just like that. And a football world is obviously no different. It's got higher pressure. It's got higher ego. It's got all those things. So those things are going to happen whenever you lose, right? Even when you win. And so here we are again, deep into January, and the playoffs are continuing, and the Bears aren't part of that postseason party. And everyone here in Chicago is left to ask, when are we going to have an opportunity to be part of that party? The Bengals, by the way, their first playoff win in 31 years, now leapfrogged the Bears, making their drought of 11 plus years even closer to the bottom of the league in that regard. And so eventually this has to get changed.
Oh gosh, get it right. Have you been called for a GM interview yet?
I have not been told that I'm not eligible though. So who knows? Maybe something pops here in the next week or so. Yourself?
No, not at all. But it's a wide net. You never know if we might get caught in it. Who can tell?
Well, I was told that in your upper right-hand drawer there, that in that short list of names you have of people you like to work with, that I'm on it. So I'm honored for that. And so if you get hired as GM and you need an assistant, hand raised.
Well, vice versa. I think we'd be a killer front office, you and I.
I think we could make some decisions at the very least and see which way we could get this thing turned.
I know. I don't know that I'd trust any of us to develop a quarterback, but whatever. We'll do our best.
You hire people to do that. You find people to do that. I don't need to do that.
Where's my list? It's all on the list.
Well, the list will come to a close soon, and hopefully we'll have 2 hires to talk about, probably 2 or 3 episodes in between now and then, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Let's see if they narrow it down. He's Dan. I'm Dionne. Like and subscribe and share, guys. We'll see you next time.